combined public safety meeting tonight. So appreciate seeing those faces that I do know and meeting some people that I do not know. And I'm sure the same holds true for Councilmember Schultz.
Hi everybody, thanks for taking the time. I'll just take 1 minute and let you know where you are. So you are in the Prism Center, which is the city-owned building of the Dallas International District. It's the first parcel that we purchased toward the larger park, which will be a 20-acre park moving primarily to the west from here. And in this building, our mayor has really moved forward an agenda of our city being an international business center. And so we have 2 international trade offices here and more coming in. And so this is all part of the reimagination of the Galleria Valley View area. And anyone who'd like, I have maps up there and lots of things that you can see. So welcome to the Dallas International District.
And so we both have about 98,000 constituents, and we could not do it without great teams. So I want to introduce you all to the District 13 team. If you don't know who's in our office, Jake Anderson, who is Council Liaison Policy Advisor, and Marcella Soto, who will grab that phone when you call. She is a code expert. So when you call with a code issue, she has encyclopedic knowledge of that.
Sorry, and we have Kimberly Richards, who, by the way, is live streaming this. So for those of you who, you can text your friends and family at home if they're not able to join you, they can watch. And then our indomitable Sophia Figueroa, who's been with District 11 for 15 years. So she is an amazing liaison for everything you need. So thank you.
All right, so tonight we're just going to, we know who the star of the show is tonight, by the way. So we're just going to get out of the way after just a couple of these other introductions. We're going to talk about citywide crime stats, kind of what we look at every single week as council members, and then show you some maps so you get a better handle on a picture of public safety and crime in our districts. And then we will let the chief talk to you at the macro level and answer some questions. So what do we have up first? I think we have. And Chief, I didn't know if you wanted to be part of this, but this is basically what we get every week. We get reports on our citywide crime statistics, and then we get them by every district. And I don't know about you, but I look at every single district because I want to get a read on what's going on all over the city, district by district. And you'll see this divided into 3 sections. There's crimes against people, which is violent crime, murder, that sort of thing. There's crimes against society, which is your gambling, prostitution, drug sales, and then there's crimes against property, so car theft, burglary of motor vehicle, and so it's really broken down into all of these categories that we scrutinize every single week.
Yeah. And before we jump into the whole crime piece, I think let's just take 1 minute and introduce all the team that's here from DTV. And also, just to be clear, if you live in District 11, that is the North Central Station. District 13 is served by 3 stations, so I think that's important, you know, and you know that senior leadership. So maybe they just want to.
Sure, you want to shout out your names? Why don't we start with Chief Watson?
Rick Watson, Deputy Chief, and I'm responsible for North Central and the Northwest Patrol Division.
I'm Mark Harris. I'm the major over the North Central Division Patrol.
I am Major Gerald Smalley. I'm the Division Commander for the Northwest Patrol Division.
I'm Eddie Garcia, and I have them all. And y'all better, might as well just start coming here.
Yeah.
Start coming up here, Rick.
So I'm hoping that everyone here will leave with a tremendous sense of pride, because thanks to the incredible work of our Dallas Police Department, thanks to the partnership of everyone who lives here in Dallas, the crime in Dallas is down. It's actually true. Crime in Dallas is down 2.6% compared to last year, and even more importantly, violent crime is down 7.29%. And the reason that the other crime is not as far down as violent crime is because there's crime against property, and so much of that, we're going to talk about it, but it has to do with us leaving things in our car and making things that there's a lot of property crime that happens, and a lot of it has to do with our own actions and what we can do to stop
So there's some other things in addition to your DPD that the city has enacted to help augment the work that they're doing. We want them out catching bad guys. And so there's some other things that can be responsive to a top American city, 1.3 million people, that Dallas has undertaken. We've got an Office of Integrated Public Safety Solutions. This is the group that works with apartment complexes, which, let's face it, that's where a lot of crime is concentrated. They're dense, some are lower income. And so the OIPS committee goes out there and they work with apartments on how they can, through environmental design, have better lighting and just have better elements there to reduce the propensity of crime. The Right Cares team, Rapid Integrated Healthcare team. This helps address some people who may be having issues that are more related to health. Maybe they're off their meds, so they're acting strange or bizarrely. So this is a team that will go out. We've expanded the number of teams. I think we have 11 now across the city. The Deflection Center is something that the county does, and we also have a sobering center along our detention center. So if someone is having an issue where they might need other kinds of treatment for an addiction, this gives them a place to be, not in the streets, but sober up and then get a touch point of someone who can help get them on a path they may need to better their health. Litter response team will help address some of the issues that you see out in the community where we've got those who may leave trash behind, and so we've added the response on that. There's a team for each quadrant of the city. We've got our city marshals, community courts that not only are out in different parts of the city to issue and deal with citations so that those who are violating the law can have a path. It's not necessarily fining people, but it might be a program that meets them where they are to help them do community service. And every time they're doing that community service, they're having another touch point with someone who can counsel them and help get them off on the direction they need to be healthy, happy, and independent. And then we also have code enforcement and community prosecution. I feel like we spend a lot of time on that. We've got very strong teams that are going out, late nights, weekends, etc., to address some noise issues and other things that come up around code. So it's not just an officer and a gun. It's very important to be sure that we are touching many points in the spectrum to make our whole community safer.
The whole point of it is about systemic change. And some of it has to do with the environment where people live, and then other is actual individual needs, whether it's mental health or other things. And so that's the place that our whole public safety effort is needed. So what we thought we'd do is just give you a quick snapshot of where the primary crime areas are in both District 11 and District 13. And if you see it, you'll see that, first of all, this is our Esperanza area, and we have a whole plan that we're working on with quality of life and improving that. We have this area is right where we are over here. I'm sorry, that's right here, I apologize. So these are where the primary crime areas are here in the map. There's a few of these floating around, but I'll be more than happy to share them. And you can see that where the big swaths of single-family homes are, there is almost no crime at all. So it's another point of comfort I would have for you. That's it again. Okay, so let's look at some big picture numbers. The crime in District 11 overall, and also Major, if you want to speak at all to some of the numbers you shared with me, I'm more than happy to share those. Those are even bigger. Crime overall is down 1.3%, and that has to do, again, with the property crime and the car break-ins that take place. Is there anything else that you want to share about that at the bigger picture? I know I'm catching you off guard.
That's all right.
Be real loud.
Just division-wide, our violent crime in North Central is down 30%. So that's a big accomplishment. Property crime is actually taken up a little bit, 2.34%, but overall crime, property and violent crime is down 2.1%. That's a little bit.
So when we look at District 13, you'll see that in our map, there's a large concentration over here. This is Vickery Meadow. This has about 30,000 plus people within a 1 mile radius in multifamily and apartments. This is Bronx level density that we have in Dallas, Texas. So when you look at the rest of the district, you see see that there are a few property crimes here and there, but by and large, when you look at numbers for the district, they're concentrated in this area. Now, I can let the chief get into it if you all want to talk about it more. There are special plans for an area like this that require special attention. It's got federal attention as well. But I just want you to know this, because the reason I showed that eye chart with all of the stats on it is because those are the numbers we review every single week. That's the raw data, and we look at those numbers. So sometimes there are numbers coming into the marketplace, they may be scary, or you think that crime is out of control. We're here tonight to help show you what the real deal is, and I want you to have a sense of where this is occurring. We don't like this, we are working on this, but when you look at the rest of the district, you see that actually I think D13 is the safest in the city with regard to violent crime, and usually in the top 4 with regard to safety across all categories. Okay, and now we would love to have our Chief of Police, Chief Eddie Garcia. What is it? Have you been here 2 years now?
I'm in my third year.
You're in, okay, sorry, into your 3rd year. So, yeah, so, you know, I know that a lot of people have questions around some of these issues, but he is here to share with you the macro view as well as take some questions if we've got time. So, Chief, take it away.
All right, so I'm glad my team's here. We'll try to deal with things from a macro level. We're trying to get where our goals are in the city of Dallas. I mean, just a little bit about myself. I'll tell you right now, I don't fit in community meetings. I am not someone that's going to stand up here and tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what the truth is. I'm not someone that's going to say something or promise something only in 6 months from now, that not be able to be the fact. All right, so I'm going to tell it like it is, kind of an individual, and where we're at. So when we look at from a city perspective, the department has some certain goals, right? The first goal is to reduce violent crime. The second one is to increase community trust. The third one is to increase morale of the department. And the final one I'll get into at the end. Really, first and foremost, really the dynamic that we have here in the city of Dallas was to reduce violent crime when I got here. Back in, we're getting the job December 23rd of 2020 when I got the call that I was coming out here. And, you know, since that time, working with criminologists on a crime plan to reduce violent crime in the city of Dallas. That crime plan is done in 3 ways. One is via grid work, hotspot policing. The other one's through place network investigations, and the last one's focus attempts. So I'll get to the last 2, and then I'll go back to the grid work. Place network investigations is really under the premise that we need to look at neighborhoods, such as the council member talked about Bakery Meadow, and look at how do we strengthen that neighborhood, right? Yes, the police have to go in to take the criminal element out of an area, but we have to look at areas holistically to look at them. Okay, do we need better streets, better street lighting? The streets need work. Is there a park for the kids to play in? Do landlords need to be held accountable? Do they need fencing? Do they need security? All those different things that really have not much to do with our response, but to enable the community to grow and get healthier as we start going. Working with the criminologists, the focus deterrence piece, which is the last piece, is to really get a group of individuals that would otherwise be susceptible to a life of violent crime and say 2 things. I have an unbelievable relationship with our federal partners, DEA, FBI, ATF, HSI, U.S. Marshals, DPS is here as well with us, working with us. And we tell them 2 things. Number 1, if you're going to come out to the city of Dallas and for our community, we're very good at what we do. And as my good friend Anton Lucky says from Urban Specialists, if people need prison ministry, then we'll ensure that you get prison ministry if you're hurting our communities. All right, and that I take those words from my good friend Anton Lucky. All right. However, if you want a better life, right? If you want housing, if you want job training, if you need a job, if you need help with mental health, if you need those types of things, we want to have a robust set of programs in place so that if you want that, you can get better and be productive in your life. We need to reinvest in people and places. That's the reality of it. I'll say this, and I say it all the time, police departments, not just in the city of Dallas, but across this country, we are the fever reducer. We're the Tylenol and the Advil you take to reduce the fever. We are not a cure to the illness. The cure to the illness is years and decades of lack of investments in places and in people. And we need to consider that every time as a police department, that we are not the cure. We are not the cure, that we have to do this collectively. Having said that, looking at our grid work, when we look at the violent crime grids, we divided the city of Dallas into about 101,000 grids. And we affect about 50 to 65 of those grids. Now, I'm not a math guy, because if I was, I probably wouldn't be wearing this uniform and standing in front of you. But I will tell you this, that 50 to 65 grids out of 101,000 is not a very high percentage. However, those grids are responsible for approximately 6 to 10% of the city's overall violent crime when we start. So the thinking was by reducing violent crime in those grids will ultimately reduce violent crime throughout the city. So we've seen our grid work. In our grids, we've reduced violent crime anywhere from 40 to 60% in some particular areas. To be a grid in the city of Dallas, you have to have led the city in the last 60 days in murder, aggravated assault, or aggravated robbery. So it's certainly not a feather in your cap to have a grid, but we know that we've been effective when we treat those grids. Now, when we look at the reduction of violent crime, first and foremost, it couldn't be done without the men and women of this police department. Okay, when we look at the reduction of violent crime, it's not a snapshot in time. We look at this from the day we started this. All right, so as you look, as we're down over 7% in violent crime, that's not just 7%, that's in with the reductions we did last year and with the reductions that we did the year before. And then we continue that. We had an uptick in murder in the first quarter of this year, overall murder in the first quarter of this year. But the interesting part about it is every quarter in the last 3 years, for some reason, the first part of the quarter gets us with the murder number. You know, when we look in 2020, we were actually down 5% after the first quarter in 2020. Except in 2020, I think we all remember we finished that year with the highest murder count that we've had in a very long time. In the last 2 years since we started the crime plan, we've been up after the first quarter in murder, only to be down at the end of the year. The reason for that is this: we believe in our crime plan that the way to get less victims is to reduce violent crime incidents. And I'll give you that example. We can't control how many people are in a house. We can't control how many people are in a car. We can't control how many people are in a bar or a restaurant. What we can control to some extent is the incident itself that leads to that violence. In this first quarter, we had the least amount of violent incidents in the city of Dallas than we've had in 5 years. All right, when we look at a city, one life is too many. There's no question about it. One life is too many. But a city's true sense of whether violence is spiking or not is based around gun-related aggravated assault. Because every gun-related aggravated assault is an attempted murder. Okay, and we can't control shot placement. The fact that we have an excellent DFR, the fact that we have excellent trauma centers as quickly as we can get to the victim and things of that nature. So when I look at violent incidents going down and I look at aggravated assault going down as it is, I feel a lot better than if it was the other way around. We could have reduced murder numbers, and I don't want people to lose their lives, but as a police chief, the tracking would be, to me, worrisome. If we had more incidents and more gun-related aggravated assaults, but fewer victims, yes, I'd be happy that we had fewer murder victims, but I would be concerned as a chief of the direction of the city and the city's violence. Been doing this job for 31 years. I'm in my 8th year as a police chief and in my 3rd year here in Dallas. So although I've started my 3rd year here, I've been a chief for a while. I call myself a blue-collar chief. I didn't go to a lot of fancy schools, but I worked in a lot of proactive units. All right? And when you look at what the men and women are doing, no crime plan is going to work without morale of your men and women being high. Okay? No plan will work. I often tell people, other chiefs around the country, I'm also president of the Major City Chiefs Association, which is the major cities in the United States and Canada. And we talk about this stuff all the time, where, you know, when they ask for the crime plan, I go, please don't screw up a perfectly good crime plan without putting your finger on the pulse of the men and women where the morale is. All right? Because I'm not going to lie to you, morale in the department, morale across the country has been down in the last few years. Okay? Honorable men and women have not felt supported. Honorable men and women have felt vilified. And I don't care what job you're in and what you do, if that's what people think about you, things aren't going to be positive. Your productivity's not going to be positive, and your recruitment's not going to be positive. All right, so I know that that tenor is different. I will tell you this, I treat this like a precious gift, and here's why. I come from the state of California. All right, don't hold that against me. I know there was a lot of people over here that were worried that don't California my DPD, I think was the resounding rallying cry when I got here. But I will tell you this, listen, it's a gift to me because I come from a place where people that support law enforcement are almost afraid to say they support law enforcement for fear. Okay? That doesn't exist here. I don't care where you are, where you live, but I have not met a neighborhood yet in California, in the city of Dallas, impacted by violent crime that regardless of language spoken, racial makeup, or economic status, that I have ever heard the words, we want to see less of you in our neighborhood. Doesn't happen, never happens. And I've asked national media to come with me to any community meeting that they want to, and they will hear that. They will hear communities, let me have it, if we're not giving them enough police resources. How many have taken me up on that? Zero. Have taken me. All right, so you have to defend your men and women. When we're wrong, we're wrong. We'll hold ourselves accountable. And unfortunately, I've had to hold my officers accountable more than I would have liked in this time that I've been here. Okay, but when we're right, regardless of the outside noise, you have to be just as loud when we're right as when we're wrong. You have to get amongst your men and women and make them know that it's okay to be a cop again. It's okay to go into the neighborhoods and do what they're asking us to do and rid their community of the criminal element. It's incredibly important. The support that we get here in the city of Dallas is again, one of the great dynamics of being from an outside place is coming in and seeing what we have here. All right, I have a good story. I went down to Austin to my first year here for an award ceremony. And Governor Abbott was giving some statements and his great support for law enforcement. And when I get up on stage with my officer that was getting an award, I said to him, Governor, I tell you, I've not heard those words come from a governor. Thank you so much for the support. He looks up at me and he goes, where are you from? It never fails. I can't even get into the punchline where everyone starts laughing. He goes, where are you from? And I go, I'm from California. He looks at me and he goes, yeah, we do things a little different out here. And I see that. We're going to hold ourselves accountable. This department has been incredibly transparent. When we talk about community trust, we're going to study ourselves. We need to be better as a profession. This is not just here in the city of Dallas, but this is around the country. All right, we need to be better. We need to look as to how we use force. We just did a use of force study here in the city of Dallas that shows that when my officers use force, there is no racial disparity when they decide to use force. We just did a study bringing an outside vendor in to look at our contacts that we have in the community, and the vendor gave us an A. The vendor gave us an A that there is no evidence of racial disparity or other type of issues when our officers made contact. There's no evidence of that. Now, did that mean to say we're perfect? Absolutely no, we're not perfect. Okay, but we need to study ourselves and make sure the community knows we're going to need to study ourselves because we want to be better. We want to be better for our neighborhoods. Okay, does that take away of what our ultimate goal is? Our ultimate goal no longer is the reduction of violent crime the gold standard. Now, it's not like, if the reduction of violent crime comes with a reduction in community trust, that's not a win. We have to reduce violent crime while at the same time increasing community trust. I work very closely with criminologists, and I'll tell you this, that when we talk about hotspot policing, that there's studies out that show that communities, when you do it right in hotspot policing, actually trust in your police goes up, not down. But you don't hear that stuff. You don't hear that because we don't study ourselves enough. We're going to make mistakes, there's no question about it. We are an imperfect profession, but when we do, we will hold ourselves accountable. We will work with our community. I was just at a church on Sunday. These days, that's yesterday, right? Sunday was yesterday. Everything kind of comes together. Where we talked about the fact that we can't do this alone. That we need our community to do the work with us. All right. When you look at some of the challenges that we have, obviously we need to ensure we have community buy-in. All right. The fact that you're here today is amazing. There's not a meeting that I go to around this city where we don't have packed rooms like this. All right, which shows the fact that people know that they want their police department to do more. Raise your hand if you'd like the Dallas Police Department to do more for you. I raise my hand right along with you. We all raise our hand. My men and women wish they could do more. There are some challenges that we've had. All right, the first and foremost, staffing. We need to grow as a police department. We're hundreds of police officers short. There is absolutely no question about it. No question about it. But I'll tell you this is not a Dallas issue solely. This is a national issue. The fact that I'm part of Major City Chiefs helps me see there are bills coming out of Washington, D.C. to try to help recruiting and retention. All right? In the President's executive order, recruiting and retention is one of the top things that the President's talking about. All right? So you don't hear that a lot, but it's known. We're in a staffing crisis. And there's no question about that we're in a staffing crisis around the country. And so they need to be loud about it. We need to be louder about it. But the fact of the matter is, it's not a Dallas thing, it's a national crisis that we're in, nationally. And the fact of the matter is that the way we change that is two things. Number one, when we go around the country, whether it's locally or other places, to say, hey, listen, if you want to be a police officer, sacrifice for your community, I have a place where you will be appreciated. Okay, and that's here in Dallas. And that's what we have to continue to do. So when the community asks this about how they can help, how they can recruit, I will tell you this, what you should be saying is what I say. That there is no city that I have seen that supports us as much as I've seen here. Okay? From my city manager to my mayor to my council, there has not been a thing that I have asked my city council since I've been here that I have not gotten. All right, and trust me, they grill me. But if we can prove we need it, I've got it. Okay, and these men and women know there aren't a lot of places that have been allowed to hire as many officers as we've been able to hire. All right, we've had challenges with that, there's no question about it. But we all know, listen, I have hit my head against the wall in another department asking for more and more officers, which I don't have to do here. Okay, because we all have an understanding, and it's not just the city leaders, but our community understands it. All right, our community knows that. All right, so the keys to making a safer Dallas are all of us working together, all of us keeping our eye on the ball, understanding and recognizing that our men and women are doing everything they possibly can to do. Now, I'll say this, when we look at response times, when we look at calls for service, response times have gone up because of staff. Response times have gone up priority 1s and priority 2s, okay? But our priority 1 calls have increased by nearly 8% compared to last year, while our staffing has kind of remained the same. Our priority 2 calls have increased by 5%, while our staffing has remained the same. So these men and women, to be honest with you, I sit back and listen, as a police chief, you're a coach, you want to put your players, so to speak, or your men and women in their best positions to succeed. And that's what we're trying to do. But the reality of it is, and I said 7-person baseball, we're playing 6-person baseball right now. Okay? That's the reality of it. We're using data the best we can to ensure the best we can that we know where the hitter's probably going to hit the ball, but sometimes they're going to hit the ball where we're not. But by using that data is the best position that we can put the city in. So when I see the violent crime numbers go down as they're going down, I'm amazed by the work that your men and women do every single day. And so, as we have challenges, I say this all the time, there's no light at the end of the tunnel for us. There's just another tunnel. Okay, so we'll continue to push that. All right, so as we continue to work this together, just understand and know that we get support because I only do this job, my men and women only do this job, and we do it well because of the support. We feed off of that. Okay, we feed off of that. You know, as we look at retention things, it's not just about dollars and cents. Okay, it's about making the lives of my officers better when they're here. So we're working on different things that we can look at as to when they're here, how we can make their lives better. How can they be more efficient? Okay, so that's what we're trying to accomplish. Anything specific about what you guys want to talk about at all before I open up questions?
I'd like you to talk a little, if you wouldn't mind, if you would just talk a little bit more about the recruitment fees and the numbers, because there's a lot of misinformation about how many do you need, what our gap is, how we're recruiting. I think that'd be helpful.
So we did a study in 2019. KPMG did a study in 2019. And these are rough numbers, approximate numbers. But right now we have probably a little under, we have about 1,150 officers that are assigned to patrol. And at that time in 2019, what KPMG said is that we should probably have over 1,400 officers that are working patrol. Right, so we're about 244 officers short of patrol now. To answer calls for service at an 80% clip. To be at 100% in 2019, KPMG said that we needed to be almost 1,700 officers. Okay, so again, where we need to grow, and we need to grow exponentially. Okay, however, we need to grow at a responsible pace. Okay, because we can't assimilate more than 250 officers a year. Can't do it. Okay, and I'll tell you why we can't do it. Number 1, all right, academy space. All right. Number 2, I would have to have more recruiters. Number 3, I would have to have more trainers. Number 4, I would have to have more supervision out on the street, which means I'd be robbing Peter to pay Paul to make all those things work with more people. One of the keys, it's not just about recruiting. All right, because if this entire room started an academy, it would take about a year and a half for all of you to be fully operational in patrol. After the academy, we just had an academy graduate that was in the academy for 9 months. And then in addition to that, they have to go through field training. So I get that recruitment gets all the attention, but to me, it's not just about recruiting. We hired 200 officers last year. And I'll tell you what, my recruiting unit did an amazing job to hire 200 officers, particularly where we're at right now. okay? We fell short by 200, our goal was 250, we hired 200. But to me, that's good. That's good for a major city. But I lost about 238 officers via attrition. So I ask you, is the problem necessarily recruiting or is it retention? Okay, yeah. It's both. Don't get me wrong. We always have to have our eyes on recruiting. No question about it. But we can't not look at, I mean, I could hire 300 and lose 350. So recruiting was great, but retention was lacking. All right, we just started a program, again, with the support of council to retain 70 officers that could have otherwise retired, where they get a bonus where they stay. So to me now, it's not about just recruiting, it's about overall staffing numbers. All right, so now as an example, if I had 70 people that were gonna retire this year and they decide to stay, well, that 200 all of a sudden looks like 270. All right, so you have to do it both ways. You gotta grow as a department, you gotta recruit laterals, you gotta make sure your people are happy and don't leave, right? And then you otherwise have to entice or motivate people to stay longer than they would have, and they don't leave when they automatically become retirement eligible. So it's not about recruiting; it's a holistic, whole body of work. You know, our recruiting unit right now is going all over the country to reach our goals. All over the country. We went to New York. I think we had like 30 or 40 applications from people from the NYPD. We went to Chicago. Got people from Chicago. We've been to Oregon. We've been to Puerto Rico. We've been everywhere to get officers into this police department, including locally, because that's where we want to raise them from as well. All right, so absolutely, the support's there, absolutely, the work is there by the men and women, but you know what, we didn't get into this mess overnight. Okay, I believe, 2014 we had, 3,700 officers? Okay, so someone please, about 3,700 officers 8 years ago. Okay, and now we're a little under, our goal this year is to get to 3,200. Okay, so when anyone thinks that we can just flip a switch and get to 3,700, it's really not. It's a little bit, that's a little bit, the expectations are a little bit too much. After, when just nearly 8 years ago, we're at nearly 3,700 officers, when we know population is growing. One of the other things that we're trying to do to help the city as well and to help this police department is we need to redistrict the police divisions. Okay, a police department every 7 to 10 years probably should be redistricting. All right, because population changes, crime changes, and things move about. All right, and we know, and I'm pretty sure we have it. I keep saying this all the time, but in no one's memory that maybe Rick's memory, you can remember redistricting. But not a lot of other people can remember the last time we redistricted here. Which to me, think about that. If we haven't redistricted, how much has Dallas grown in 20 years? Okay, well, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, but have we done a redistrict of the divisions in 20 years other than when South Central was put in?
You're correct, Chief. We have not done that.
So, so I get why administrations don't, it's a heavy lift. All right, you gotta make sure you got cars, you gotta make sure the radio channels are in line. There's a lot more to it, right? You all have to know what divisions that you're in. There's a lot to it, but we're moving forward in earnest. As a matter of fact, I think something's coming up on Wednesday to have that discussion. All right, to get that underway. All right, and there might be some brick and mortar things that we're gonna have to do. All right, I'll tell you right now, and I've said it before, I would be shocked if that report doesn't come back and tell us that the Northeast Division needs to be cut in two. Okay, I'd be shocked. Now, I'm not saying that will happen, but I ride patrol, all right, and I know how difficult it is to get around in certain places. All right, so we're doing that. You know, we're gonna pilot what's called a 410 shift at one of our stations. Okay, this goes back to making the quality of life better for our officers. Right now, our officers work 5 days. All right, since I got here, we wanted to try a 410. 10 hours, 4 days. Okay, well, to me, this is what I look at. If KPMG tells me the efficiencies on a 5.8 or a 9, but the quality of life for my officers is a 3, okay? If a 410, efficiency-wise, maybe a 7, but the quality of life for my officers coming to work jumps up to a 5, then I think I make up those points with them being happier coming into work. So we're going to give that a shot. And unless it falls flat on its face, I'd like to push it citywide by the end of the year. Now, I talked to the associations. There's not a big decision that I make in this police department that changes the culture of this department without bringing my unions and associations around the table to have conversations and having stakeholders at the table. And we've had these discussions. And I go, hey, listen, we're gonna try this in earnest. I promise you we're gonna try it, but it can't fall flat on its face, right? The other dynamic is, I don't wanna, if I survey the officers themselves and they say it's not making their lives happier because they're busier, then we're gonna go a different route. All right, but all those things are motivators. All those things are motivators for the officers. So that's kind of the general sense of what's going on citywide. And I will take one. No, I'm just kidding. I'll take questions now. You have your hand up, Gordon.
How many of those grids are in these two districts?
I think there's 7. I think there's approximately 7 of those grids.
That's really good. I didn't think we had any.
When you say that, I forgot about Northeast, because Miss Willis takes in Northeast, so she does have grids.
Yeah, I've got
Yes.
Vickery Meadow, but that's in Project Safe Neighborhood, but I think out of those, I mean, whenever I ask about it, I didn't recall that the number was that high.
And there's 50 grids total?
There's 64 grids now.
You added some.
I think we added some in certain. We couldn't oversaturate certain areas because of the demand, the call demand.
Are you moving these grids as you're successful moving that grid to
It's a
some
great question.
other
So
grid?
we reassess every 60 days. Because we were assessing every 90 days, and what we started seeing is that we started seeing crime drop after the treatment after about 60 days. So that what it enables us to do is now to work with the criminologist, and that we reassess after every 60 days so that we can kind of go around to the areas that we need to tamp down the temperature. Yes, let me get it.
First of all, thank you so much, Chief, and all the chiefs who are giving up valuable time to be here, and I mean valuable time, for this wonderful photo op for our city council people who really are not supposed to be talking to you during election time, but you're here. I am Benjamin at North Central. I've been called Private Benjamin because I put in a lot of volunteer work with the police department at North Central. I was robbed at gunpoint in my alley, and most recently I was robbed right here at Target. I must be a moving target. But in any event, I have to say these are the facts. 200 officers, like you say, were hired last year. We lost 238 officers. And the percentage of this year's budget devoted to law enforcement is less than the percentage devoted to the same time last year, as you know. And yet we're short of officers, and we have growth in population added to that. I have to say that I guess people are leaving, the police officers are leaving because they're going elsewhere because they are getting more money. We have EMP, the police officers who are working at the hours that you mentioned also have to take on additional moonlighting for us in our expanded neighborhood patrol to supplement their income, which is atrocious. It shouldn't be. It's an embarrassment to the police department that we don't have a good quality of life for our police officers, period. And they're leaving and they're going to other cities because they get more money. And these wonderful city council people voted 8-7. The city council approves removing $10 million from the Dallas Police Department overtime draft budget against the wishes of our chief of police, Garcia. So, anyway, this is just a few of the things. I have a lot of the papers here. I want to know how many people here received a raise last year or the year before. Well, our city council, my turn, ma'am. Let me say this. How many people here have been had a raise? Well, our city council. They voted themselves a 20% raise.
Let me address it. Let me address it. Man, first of all, thank you for the support of the men and women. But let me go back to the beginning. Listen, as a police chief, I have 16 bosses in the city. All right, city manager, the mayor, and every single one of my council members. I am throughout this entire city, throughout the year, going to community meetings and talking to my community. And the fact that you're here right now is important because there's a lot of disinformation that's put out. And you know what? Ask me, because I will tell you the truth. All right, so this isn't not news. This is not specific. I go to community meetings constantly, and I love to do it because I love to fix disinformation. I love to support the work that my great men and women do, and I do want to completely say that I get full support from my mayor, my city manager, and council. And you're hearing it from me. And anyone that knows me personally, what have you, knows if I didn't mean it, I wouldn't say it. All right, so I'll say that. The fact of the matter, really, with regards to the officers leaving for other agencies, that has certainly died down quite a bit in the last 3 years. That was a dynamic that occurred earlier. I will tell you right now that the association will tell you the pay is at a point where the officers. I'm not losing officers going to other smaller agencies. I'm losing them to retirement. I'm losing some at the front end because they end up. This is not what they want to do. But it certainly isn't. It's not. They're not leaving for a lack of support because I would hear about it. Listen, if I was a police chief, and you brought it up, so I'm just going to fix this information. If I was a police chief that didn't meet with his associations, then I would say, oh well, I don't know. I meet with my associations. As a matter of fact, I just met with them yesterday, and trust me, my associations would tell me that. So again, this department's working extremely hard. When we're in the budget time right now, listen, I'll tell you what, we're instituting a lot of overtime right now to keep the city safe. A lot of it. We have to have more officers in areas, and we need to do that. I don't know if there's a question in there. All right. Yes, ma'am.
We had the pension crisis a few years ago, and as I remember, all they did was a short-term fix. Is that still underfunded?
I will say this, and I say this quite often. That's a little. The number itself is a little outside my lane. I will tell you this. It's not doing well. There's no question about it. And I will say this, and I said this before. It needs to get fixed. When I was in California in my department, we had a pension crisis, and it caused a mass exodus. I've lived through it. I've seen it. When I became chief in California in 2016, I had to rebuild a police department where I had literally 300, 400 officers leave because they went somewhere else. So although I can't tell you the numbers itself and the process that goes and how we need to fix it, I can tell you it needs to get fixed because we can't kick the can down the road. And I know that there's a lot of interest in council to do it. I meet with individuals that really have their heart in it and understand the issues with it, and so we definitely need to do it. However, I don't know all the ins and outs, but what I say very honestly, like I told you at the beginning, I can't give you a number. I just know there's issues with it that needs to get fixed. There's no question.
Have a plan? So let me just say from a council perspective. First of all, from a council perspective, the other thing that's important to know is that this is a statewide crisis. Every city in the state of Texas is dealing with the pension issue as well. And so we are all committed, the city of Dallas for sure, the entire council, our city manager, everybody is completely committed to fixing this. I think that what's happening now in terms of your question about the plan is the people who understand the bigger finance and a multi-billion-dollar challenge are actually beginning to work it through because we know that we have to deal with it and everybody is committed to making that work. And right now, rather than necessarily say, oh, we should do this or we should do that, what we do know is that we're going to tackle it at a state level, and we are also going to completely commit to it at a city level, because anyone who's putting their life in the line for us, we must be able to make sure that they have a secure future for themselves and their families.
The timeline was 2025 too.
The big problem came in 2017, that was 6 years ago.
Right, and there was
no
a
plan yet.
Oh no, there was a timeline set, so there was an interim solution which everyone agreed to, and then the timeline is 2025. So the mayor has worked on finding some. Yeah, that was the deal. And so we went to the legislature, and so I'm sure we'll go back to the legislature, and they want to see, I mean, it's good for business in Texas, it's good for residents in Texas to have a safe environment. So I think you're going to see a lot of commitment, but it's also a big issue to be able to put together. So I know the mayor has talked to some people to assign to a force to work on this, but it is working. But just so you understand, the timeline is actually 2 years out from now when the next phase occurs.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the numbers, climb numbers in the city of Dallas. Really proud of the city of Dallas Police Department. Rumor has it there are some cities that are talking about funding the police department less. And I understand they have funded it less. What has happened with these cities? What are their crime numbers like, and what may they be like in 3 years?
Okay, great question. So obviously, we know that there was some legislation that throughout the state, specifically with the funding, from a perspective of getting state dollars, right? That was put through. What I'll tell you this: cities that don't get support aren't doing very well. We talk about, as an example, I talked to my fellow police chief, Joe Chacon in Austin, as a matter of fact. They bring in 100 state troopers a week, different state troopers. And so when they talk about the reductions of violent crime, it comes because all of a sudden, wow, imagine that. More police officers with a plan, reduce crime. Whoever would have thought that? It's mind-boggling to me. And so no, cities that aren't getting supported are not doing very well. And that's not just here, that's nationwide. And so certainly, and I had to testify in front of the Senate last year when I said exactly that. And I told the committee members, more police officers and a plan will reduce violent crime. And they agreed. And so we talk about that all the time. We have a plan in place. I wish we could have more grids. But again, we have a plan in place that shows that more officers in the right spots will reduce violent crime. Again, reduce it from the fever reduction perspective. Again, I will say that again, we're not a cure. All right, we have to do those reinvestments have to go hand in hand. There's example after example that vacant lots, dilapidated buildings. You fix those, you see violent crime drop in those areas. Those are from the criminologists. All right, so those are things that we need to continue to do, right? In addition to what we're doing. But in answer to your question, yeah, the departments that are getting defunded are not doing well.
Let me jump in, Chief, because we've talked about this, and you had shared with me that that Dallas does not do that. You're supported, you just said that you are, by the mayor and the council and the city manager. And that you had shared with me that when people pick up that mantra and keep repeating it, that it can actually hurt our recruitment and retention. And I think you can't simultaneously say we want more officers and then contribute to harming our efforts to recruit and retain. So anyway, if you want to.
Well, listen, I know you just asked the question. The fact of the matter is they don't do work. There's no question. But I will say again, yeah, I do talk about that with regards to it's not helpful to us on a recruiting perspective because it's not true for starters. And the second part of it, to be frank, is like as these officers are kicking the tires, I was 21 years old when I started. I've been in this job, I'm going to help you do that. I've been doing this job for 31 years. All right, I was 21 years old when I started, and I tell you what, I would have been kicking the tires and see, okay, what city supports us and which ones don't? Because I'm going to go to the one that supports us. I'm not going to go to the one that doesn't. And so then when we need that perspective, we did a big recruiting push when we did a police department recruiting video that we did. I think that the recruiting video came out great. But what I wanted to do and what we're working on is having the community do that. Doing a recruiting push, whereas at these young individuals that I could play at a recruiting fair and say, this is what your city thinks of me. All right, how is that different from going to some other cities that we all know don't have that same type of support? Because I'll tell you what, without that support, we would be dead in the water if my men and women weren't going out and being proactive at 2 in the morning and making a stop or contacting an individual with a firearm, with drugs, stopping the robbery before it happens, stopping the aggravated assault before it happens. And the only way we're going to do that, I can't force them to do that. I can force them to answer the 911 call. I can't force them to do that. No police chief can force them to be proactive. And the only reason they will be proactive is if chaos happens and they're right, that we will stand behind them, not just as a department, but as a city. And those things are very important because I remember, and I was talking to the recruits, we just graduated in academy on Friday, and I remember being in that seat. And I remember that day. And I remember thinking to myself, I would not have gone to that department if I didn't feel that they supported the work that their men and women have to do. And so it's incredibly important. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. First of all, thank you, Chief Garcia, for your service. Thank you to all the men and women in blue for your service. And how can we help you?
You know what, again, supporting the police department, obviously being patient with us. I mean, I want you to know these men and women are working extremely hard, and we wish we could do more. Understanding that dynamic that, just a couple of weeks ago, and it hits me, I'm an emotional guy. Two of my officers made a proactive stop on an individual that they didn't have to stop. And they ended up fighting with the guy who takes out a gun and shoots at them. And if it weren't for their bravery to take this individual down, we got into an officer-involved shooting. They were safe. They took the suspect into custody, but they didn't have to do that. This is a bad guy, right? He had cut off his ankle monitor, I believe, again, and he was on some federal type of probation for drugs or something. He was a guy that was doing bad things in our city, and my officers didn't need to do that, but he would have continued to do bad things in our city if it wasn't for the amazing work and the sacrifices of our men and women. And so when I say they're trying, I mean they're trying with their lives. And so just understanding that and giving us and having these conversations incredibly is amazing. Telling everyone how much you support your police is incredibly important. And you know what makes my heart full is when I'm in an elevator and one of my officers says thank you for something. Right? It goes a long way to just when you see an officer just to say thank you for what you're doing. Because these officers are not immune from what the national narrative has been. And oftentimes they are so busy going call to call to call that they don't have time often to take a step back and go, the reason I'm doing this is for my community. So that saying thank you goes a long way.
And I would just point out one other thing that you can do. We're starting a program, you know, there's like Friends of the North Haven Trail and Friends of this park and that. We're going to be creating friends groups for all of our stations, police and fire stations. So it's actually organized, and instead of just, you know, sort of sometimes people bring over treats and things like that, we're going to try to do it in a much more organized way and in a way that gives them full support for lots of other things that they may need. So I think that that'll be something that we're able to roll out. We're going to start with North Central and some of our fire stations as well. So if you're interested in creating a Friends of, you know, group for the station, just let our office know.
The other things that we can do, I mean, if you're,
No, that's for you. I mean, just.
well, I was just going to say the other things we do is, you know, really knowing your station, knowing who your MPOs are, your neighborhood policing officers. They're incredibly helpful to all of us. All right, because what they do is they enable our officers to deal with some higher priority calls that can be handled at the neighborhood police officers level, and knowing those stations is incredibly important. You know, recognizing and knowing when there's community events, and I will say this, they're just as hard. We weed and seed in Dallas, and here's what weed and seed is. We're going to weed the criminal element out of our streets, but we're also going to seed our community with positivity. And as hard as our SWAT teams, our CRTs, our narcotics, our robbery units, our gang units are working, equally as hard are community affairs officers working hard to ensure that we have that community trust, because we're nothing without. There's a reason why our solve rate on some of our higher priority calls is as high as it is, and it's because we have trust from our community. And so we have to continue to do that, continue to tell the story, and continue to try to break the narrative. All right, as I mentioned before, not one neighborhood has ever asked for less of us. Unfortunately, that's a narrative that's been pushed out across this country that we're starting to bring the pendulum back a little bit. We need to continue to talk about that. And so that would be incredibly helpful as well. Yes, ma'am.
We got one.
I was at a city commission meeting today at City Hall, and there were 12 districts represented there out of 14, right? I think 14. And we were talking about you guys going around and to all the districts and having conversations. So just, you know, you guys got really high praise today at the Senior Affairs Commission. Everybody loved these meetings and what you guys were doing and taking the time to do it. So congratulations. You should have been smiling and listening to all the great kudos you got today. So, right.
Appreciate it. I'm looking at this slide. It looks like I'm
getting
stopped. I get it. I understand. I can't see. Yes, sir.
To what extent is our local DAs being soft on crime impacting your morale for existing officers and those that have left and those potentials coming to Dallas?
That's a great question. So I'll say this. Since I've been here listen, I'll say this, and I'm sure the judge would say the same thing. We may not agree with everything, but Judge Crusoe has been a very good partner for me when it comes to violent crime. Specifically, I will tell you this. The problem that I have had, and I don't know if anyone follows me on Twitter, There have been decisions, not all judges. There have been, the problem that has been with our police department is there have been irresponsible decisions made by individual judges allowing individuals back on the street after they've committed violent crime. Okay, that I'm not gonna lie, in the name of social justice, that does not help our communities, it hurts them. Listen, when I go, in the city of Dallas, you know, when I go to these community meetings, particularly in areas that are impacted by violence, accountability is key amongst any group that I go talk to. Okay, when someone puts their life on the line to help the police department bring a perpetrator to justice, okay, only to see that individual back in their neighborhood in 2 weeks, it erodes the confidence in the system. Okay, I have said this from time to time, and I've said it publicly, and I'll say it again. We don't get to say we're serious about gun violence. We don't get to say we're serious about gun violence while my officers risk their lives every night to bring individuals that have committed gun crime only for them to be back out on the street in a matter of days or weeks.
Dereliction of duty.
Not y'all.
No, I get it, that's not the fact that I get it.
That's the county
How can we
magistrate.
prosecute them?
What's that?
How can we prosecute them?
I know that Austin is trying to do some things. Now, listen, here's what I'll say. Listen, I mean, I am not. You know, there are people obviously that we need to certainly. You know, I'm also not someone that doesn't believe in redemption. All right. As I said, I went to Hutchins Prison last year, had a conversation with 50 individuals that are getting paroled back into Dallas County, and I told them, I said, this might be weird that a police chief is standing in front of you telling you, I want you to succeed, and I need you to succeed. Okay, so if you need help, I want to help you, because regardless what side of the fence you're on, if individuals fail, they don't fail for spitting on the sidewalk or running a red light. They're going to fail because someone else in our community has been victimized. And so it would behoove us all to do that. But police departments cannot be the only cog of the criminal justice system where accountability is demanded. It can't be. And I'll tell you this, if some of these individuals that have made these irresponsible decisions would come to my community meetings that I go to hear the fear, to hear the trauma that gun violence has caused our neighborhoods, I would hope to think that they would make different decisions.
You know, my husband's wife was raped and murdered. Mrs. Schultz knows that. And the murderer is back on the streets. So thank you for your question, sir. There's no truth in sentence.
Well, I tell you what, I know there are some other questions here, but we want to respect everyone's time. I hope you got one of these handouts. This gives you dashboards on family violence, operational dashboard, violent crime, etc. So if you want to dig into numbers, it is all out there for you to find, in addition to the information that we send out on crime statistics. There are things that you can do. Robin, you asked about what everyone can do. Let these guys go out and chase the bad guys, and don't bake crime to our neighborhoods. Take, lock, hide. So thank you all for coming tonight, and we'll be around for a few minutes if anyone has some other questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you.